of the Cabinet Scrutiny Committee on the 22nd of February 2023. I am Councillor Phil Rogers and I will be chairing this meeting. Please ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. In addition, when asked to raise your hand, if members who are virtually viewing this meeting could raise your electronic hand, and for members in the council chamber, just raise your hand. For the purpose of declarations, I would like to confirm that we will be scrutinizing items 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 15. Now I will move on to declarations, agenda item 2. Are there any declarations of interest?
I don't see any, Chair.
Thank you, Charlotte. Moving along to agenda item 3, minutes of previous meeting. You will see the minutes attached at page 5 to 22 of your agenda pack. If you feel these are an accurate record of the meeting, can I please have a proposer and a seconder to approve these minutes? I will propose them.
I second, Chair.
Ken. Thank you. Agenda item 4, pre-decision scrutiny. We will now move to the Cabinet agenda for pre-decision scrutiny. As previously mentioned, we've decided to scrutinise items 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 15 on the Cabinet agenda. Moving along. Item number 7. Self-assessment, pages for 21-22 on pages 17 to 56. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
Chair, nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Two members have questions for the officers. I have one already. Councillor Carol Clement Williams, please.
Yes, Chair, thank you. And sorry if ducking out of the pre-briefing. I'm afraid I had connection problems. I just wanted to say there's not a lot in this report, to be honest, that we haven't heard before. I just think it's very, very long document. It was very monotonous to read, and I don't think there's an awful lot of information in there that we wouldn't have already known. I just wish that we could have reports where there's a concise conclusion with the main points in it at the very beginning. I've asked for this before, and then maybe all the detail that comes after it, so that we can have more of an idea at the very beginning about what we've got coming up. But just an observation on that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clement Williams. Okay to take. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. There is a lot of detail in the report, Councillor Clement Williams. We did include a lot of detail in there to meet the statutory requirements that are contained in the legislation. But just to assure you, we will be developing an easy read version of the document for when we publish, because there is a lot of information in there for public consumption. So there'll be an easy read version in there. And your comments around a summary at the start, we'll take that on board for the 22-23 self-assessment that we'll be bringing forward to you in the summer. So we'll take that on board. Thank you.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you both. Are there any other questions? Okay then. The recommendations are listed on page 17 of the Cabinet agenda pack. I'm happy to propose it. Could I have a seconder, please? Tim?
Second, Chair.
Thank you. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
Don't see any abstentions, Chair.
Thank you. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
Chair, supported to Cabinet.
Thank you, Charlotte. Moving on to item 8, the establishment of a liaison forum in respect of the Avon Valley Adventure Resort, pages 57 to 64. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
Nothing for myself, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. Two members have questions for the officers. I have a few already lined up. Councillor Rob Jones, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The comments I'm going to make refer to agenda item 8 and 9, so rather than duplicate for 9, if I mention it now. It's regarding pages 60 and on the first report and at item 8 and 70 on item 9. I fully understand that this is to set up 2 liaison committees for both items. What concerns me here is that where it's got valleys, communities impact, there's no implication. And where it says workforce impact, there's no implication. But there is considerable implication in relation to both agenda items situated where they are. And in particular to agenda item 8, the wild fox. My concern here is, whilst rightly the 2 members for the Upper Avon Valley are mentioned in the list of people that should sit on the liaison committee, I'm wondering whether Cabinet would consider, and I'm not putting an amendment in, it's for Cabinet to consider whether in fact the lower Avon Valley should also be represented on that committee. It will have an impact in relation to certainly the construction phase going forward, because this is going to affect the whole of Port Talbot. There's only 3 ways you can get to that area with wild fox: up over from Treorchy, up over from Caira, or up from through town. So something just to consider in the balance, because the Cummer ward actually bounds with the Carmarthen and Bryn ward, and both item 8 and item 9 will have considerable workforce impacts in relation to the planning and pre-commencement. And it's just my concern that the lack of detail there, that the impacts will have, are not truly reflected in the way that the reports are presented. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Craig?
Thank you, Chair. I take the point on board absolutely, Councillor Jones, and what you're saying. I think when we look at the valley impact and the workforce impacts, the reason it's been identified specifically as no impacts in that particular report is it's not looking at the setup of the schemes in general and the work programmes, obviously, that are happening there. It's merely relating to the actual governance framework that's been put in place and the terms of reference that have been proposed to us by way of Wild Fox and then later the GCRE project as well in the next report. So we've tried to focus specifically on the setup of these schemes in the report, hence the reason no implications have been identified. But the important thing to note is these actual organisations don't actually have any decision-making powers. They're liaison forums only. So if it's the case that decisions need to be taken in respect of these matters, it will come back through the Council's decision-making processes then, which will see it fully considered against valley community impacts, workforce impacts, etc. in that regard. So hopefully that can answer your first part of the question. Looking at the second part then, obviously, about wider boundaries being included, I think the important thing to note initially is these are terms of reference that have been set up by the external bodies, being Wild Fox and then later GCRE. It will be open for the members who have been appointed to those particular forums to identify if there are any issues which could have any neighbouring impacts on adjacent wards, and those terms of reference can always be reconsidered ultimately within those particular forums. What we're looking to do initially is appoint the initial membership of the invitees that we've had the opportunities to sit on these boards, and those invitees then can take those views forward and obviously raise then if we need to look at extending the remit or the geographic area the where the representatives actually come from. So I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Jones?
Yeah, workforce implications again, because there will be a requirement for admin support in relation to these liaison committees, and obviously that'll put an already stretched workforce even further, so that there will be, even going outside the parameters of what you said, an implication for workforce, particularly the Democratic Services officers, if they're going to service these liaison committees.
It's intended at this stage, it's not actually going to be the Democratic Services officers, I believe. What we'll be looking at with the GCRE one is they will have their own officers ultimately engaged from GCRE Limited who'll be leading on that area. So it will just be senior officer and elected member representatives then to that group. We'll be looking then to try and absorb obviously the Wild Fox element in the existing structure that we have. So hopefully it won't cause too much of a major impact on any additional staff with additional duties at this stage. But we're still working through what a lot of those arrangements will be. And if there are any impacts there, we can obviously report that back to members if there are any concerns in that regard.
Yeah, I won't steal Councillor Percy's thunder because I know he's got a question in relation to that, but that could have an impact in relation to what he's going to ask. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Next up, Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Diolch, Cadeirydd, thank you. Likewise, the comments I'm going to make are applicable to item 8 and item 9. And it's just in relation to the minutes of these meetings, I'm assuming are not going to be published publicly. And it's whether the chairs of the relevant scrutiny committees could be circulated the minutes, and whether we could have any assurance that that would happen as a matter of course. And that's just in relation to, obviously, if any issues are identified or the need for a decision to be made, arises in these meetings. As the report says, it will be coming through the council's decision-making process, and therefore it will come through scrutiny. And it would be obviously helpful, with my scrutiny chair hat on, to sort of at least be aware and be able to keep abreast of issues that are developing in these committees. So I'm hoping that's a relatively straightforward request, and I'd appreciate if I could get assurance that could happen to whatever relevant scrutiny chairs for both reports. Thank you, Chair.
Craig?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question, Councillor Percy. As these are outside bodies, obviously the usual protocol is obviously that minutes of this kind are not recirculated ultimately to all representatives of the council. To address the points so that you're making, there are powers ultimately within the scrutiny procedure rules and as chairs of scrutiny, where you can seek assurances from the work that these outside bodies have undertaken via the representatives who had actually been appointed to them. So one of the things you may wish to consider within your forward work programme for scrutiny, in order to get the understanding about as to what is actually happening, is invite the representatives who are appointed from the council to sit on these outside bodies to come and explain to you what's actually happening within these meetings, the types of matters that are being considered, and you'd be able then to utilise the scrutiny role then in that manner to hold those individuals to account for the work that they're doing in representing the authority in these organisations. So even if you don't necessarily get minutes of individual meetings, what you will be getting are the assurances and the work programme that members and officers are undertaking being placed on your agenda as and when ultimately you would require them.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Percy, would you like to come back?
Yeah, if that's okay. I appreciate that's an option, Craig. I suppose I think it'd be a bit more straightforward and less work for everybody involved if scrutiny chairs could have sight of the minutes, and then, for example, if there was an issue that the scrutiny chair felt needed some extra attention, then they could call that relevant person in to the committee. I think the problem I'd have as a scrutiny chair is I wouldn't know what was going on to know whether it was worth asking them to come in and to sort of maybe waste their time. And I think I'm perhaps trying to remove any additional onerous reports and work and sort of meeting time by just being aware of an issue. And then I think, okay, well, if this fits in with our work stream, or there's something that's coming up here that we should look at, then I've got the information to do it. I think that's sort of where I'm coming from. But I appreciate that might require the text to be slightly amended to ensure that is done as an action point. But if you feel that's something that's not possible to do, then obviously I'd appreciate your advice on that.
Craig?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Percy. I think at this stage we are in some difficulty because obviously these are outside bodies which are being set up by external organisations, meaning the ability for us to amend terms of reference and to be able to consider those is not really something that does sit naturally within our gift at the moment. So I can understand the point you're making about it being easier for scrutiny chairs and scrutiny members, obviously, to understand what's going on. But because we don't have that particular protocol, because these are not organisations which we are actually setting up, there's a difficulty then in us trying to devise terms of reference which would enable that to happen. What I would suggest is, as part of the forward work programme of scrutiny, we find ways to make sure that you are regularly kept updated. We can try and find ways to put standing items on agendas and consider those matters. And the Democratic Services officers will gladly work with you to make sure that the appropriate sightage of these issues which are going on and to have that level of assurance coming forward can be captured within your work programme then. So we can hopefully try and address it in different ways if we can't then be in a position ultimately where we can provide the minutes to you.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Percy, are you happy with the response?
If I could come back really briefly, Chair, I'd appreciate it.
No problem, Sean.
Yeah, I think I suppose it would just be from a point of clarity then that, as written, both reports would preclude those minutes being circulated, because obviously I was seeking assurance that would happen. But is it your view that if these reports are agreed and the terms of reference are published as agreed, that it would be not possible to do that? and under that terms of reference, or is that something that could perhaps just informally be agreed by the committee? Does it need to be in the terms of reference? I'm not really sure. Again, I'd appreciate your advice on that point, Craig. Thank you.
Craig?
Yeah, I think we'd have to look into that, Councillor Percy, obviously, because these are terms of reference which have been proposed to us as part of the process. The representatives, obviously, who are in those meetings can, for example, make representations in that regard when they're at those meetings, that certain matters need to be considered. But I think for now, we're in a position where we're not going to be able to include any additional amendments on those. And we've just got to consider it in line with the scrutiny procedure rules, where we can then try and make sure you get the necessary assurances you want then as a chair of scrutiny.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Percy, is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Are there any other questions on this? Councillor Ken Phillips, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on what Councillor Jones had brought up about the no implications on the Valley's community impact. I totally understand what you're saying about there being no impact from just the setting up of the liaison group, but it does look a bit odd to have an impact assessment that's about Big Valley's projects that says there are no impact. Would it be possible in future just to add an explanatory note, something along the lines of no direct implications from the setting up of the group? Any future implications from the influence of the group would be dealt with by future impact assessments as necessary, that sort of thing.
Absolutely fine, no problem at all. We can make sure that's included in future reports for you.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Are there any other questions, please? Okay. Yeah, there'll be no further questions then. The recommendations are listed on page 61 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. I'm happy to propose them. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ken Phillips. Thank you. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I don't see any abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Charlotte. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
Chair, that decision is supported to Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Moving along. Similar lines, item 9, establishment of an advisory panel in respect of the Global Centre for Rail Excellence, pages 65 to 85. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
Nothing at this stage from myself, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. Do members have any questions for the officers? I have Councillor Rob Jones has already indicated his. I have Councillor Sonia Reynolds, please.
Thank you, Chair. Bearing in mind what Craig has said about the ownership of these groups and who the organisations setting them up, my comment becomes more advisory in a way, and a hope that perhaps the council can make representations. I am very aware, in terms of the liaison committee for this group, of the need to make sure that all parties are well represented, and of the impact that this is likely to have on commoners. I'm aware from the implications in the East Pit in my own area. I have to express the concern that it just says representative of the commoners. Now, if that only means one representative against a whole range of councillors and others, it doesn't give great representation to a group of people who have quite a hefty interest in this area of land and in the work going on it. So I think it would be good as a council for us to represent our local residents, many of whom will be commoners, and make that point to the GCRE group. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Craig?
Yeah, just to pick up on that point, obviously the wording in the terms of reference we've been provided by the GCRE group is representative of the common associations probably in that area. What I would suggest is obviously it would be up to the members of the various committees. They can make those points known should they wish, but also as well there are local representatives from what would be the Powys side of the border, obviously where some of the common land may ultimately exist. They'll be able to take forward any representations on the part of land within their area if they feel it's something that they need to raise as well. So just to highlight that it's not just representatives coming from Neath, but there will be representatives from Powys who obviously can make similar points now on any common land within their area.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Reynolds, are you happy with the response?
Thank you, Chair. I don't think there's much else that we can do, but if we can make sure that our representatives on those committees are aware of our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Are there any other questions? Okay. The recommendations are listed on page 70 and 71 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. I'm happy to propose them. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Tim Bowen.
I second, Chair.
Thank you. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I don't see any abstentions, Chair.
Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
That decision is supported to Cabinet, Chair.
Thank you, Charlotte. On to item 10 on the agenda, phase 1 of the accommodation review, pages 89 to 102. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
Nothing from me, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola Pierce. Do members have any questions for the officers? I have a few lined up already. Councillor Ken Phillips, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask for some clarification and some more detail on the issue on page 91, 92, up to 6 rooms in Kimler Hospital being retained for specialist training purposes for social services. Can we have a little more detail on why that's the case and whether there is a timeline in place and a process for arranging relocation? Thank you.
Nicola, if you'd like to take this, please. Oh, sorry, Andrew. Could Andrew come in, please? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, that's a good question. So it's the rooms are being retained for manual handling training, and we haven't yet got a time frame for us to take out that specialist equipment and put that elsewhere. So as soon as I do have that, I will let the committee know. But at the moment, we don't have a time frame, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Phillips, are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving along, Councillor James Henton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it carries on pretty much from what Ken said there. When the rooms are eventually moved, will it be considered that current disused buildings that are suitable, such as the old care home in Brincourt North, will that be considered to be used for a training facility for these rooms that when they move?
Thank you, Councillor Henton. Andrew, please. Oh, sorry, Nicola. Nicola this time. Sorry. Nicola's in before you, Andrew. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I suppose I wasn't going to be specific in relation to social services. My response is fairly general, really. The purpose of this accommodation review is to enable the local authority to reduce the number of buildings that we're currently occupying, because not only are we paying rent on those that we are leasing, but we're also using energy and other resulting in other utility bills associated with those the occupation of those buildings. So we actually want to reduce the number of buildings that we are currently operating. So this is phase 1 of a multi-phased strategy relating to the use of our accommodation. And if we require the use of any other buildings for displaced purposes, we will be looking to utilise the buildings which we are retaining in the long term, because what we don't want to do is to move them into another building which is going to cost us money to operate, or alternatively move them into another building that may form part of a later phase of our accommodation strategy. So the whole purpose of this is to drive down costs so that we can protect services, and also to ensure that we are meeting the sustainability principles that we as an authority and the UK government and Welsh government want to achieve, which is to secure net zero carbon by 2030. So there's a number of reasons associated with the proposal in this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Henton, are you happy with that? Thank you, Councillor Henton. Next up is Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Diolch. So my question's in relation to the specifics of each of the proposals. So we've got an overall figure of how much this is going to save, but the report doesn't really go into very much detail as to what the breakdown of that saving is and whether that figure includes maybe some costs associated with the closure of the buildings as well. So I just wonder if officers are able to take us through each proposal one by one and explain how much is saved by closing each of those buildings or surrendering the lease, and just give us an idea of those cost savings and where they've come from. Obviously, you mentioned some may be rent, some may be utility bills, but obviously we're not really aware of how that breakdown looks at the moment.
Thank you. Nicola, please.
Chair, I don't have that information specifically to hand because it's detailed. There's a detailed question that Councillor Percy is asking for. It relates primarily to the rent that we're paying on the leased properties. So the report indicates the ones that are leased at the moment, and it is electricity, water rates, and so on. We also have to pay non-domestic rates for those properties. So it's a combination of all of those. Now we can pull together a table for members and we can circulate it after the meeting should members wish to see that level of detail.
Thank you, Nicola. That would be excellent if you could, please. Councillor Percy?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Nicola. Obviously, it is a bit disappointing, really, that information isn't included in the report. It is, although you feel it's quite a detailed question, I think given that the report is to make a decision on closing those buildings, I think we need to understand how much each of those buildings is actually contributing towards the aim of the accommodation strategy, and also what some of the consequences may be of those decisions. And we really don't have, much information in front of us today. And so even just for future reports on the accommodation strategy, I would certainly expect for every single building that we are proposing to close or make a change to have a breakdown of where the savings are coming from, what any costs associated with that closure are for each proposal, because that will allow us to properly have a discussion around the merits of each of those proposals. It's very hard for us to make a judgment on the merits of these proposals in front of us today without that information to hand.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Nicola, if we could have those reports, then please, we'd be very grateful. Thank you.
No problem, Chair. We can circulate those reports after the meeting. And just for the benefit of members, obviously the report does indicate the savings for the combined buildings within phase one are in the region of £158,000. Now, as I say, it's phase one of a multi-phased programme relating to our accommodation strategy, and we have to start somewhere. It's, as I said, it's not just about money, it's about reducing our overall carbon footprint and reducing our energy consumption as an organisation. And there are some buildings which are easier to move out of and to either repurpose for alternative purposes or sell. There are other buildings which are a little bit more difficult to achieve. And it's fair to say the buildings contained within phase one are of the easier type, albeit nothing is easy in terms of trying to deliver services for a wide range of people in our communities, without impacting upon the quality of that service. But I will secure a more detailed breakdown for members and I will circulate it after the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Percy, are you happy to receive those after the end of the meeting? Lovely, thank you very much. Next up then, please, Councillor Sonia Reynolds, please.
Thank you. I'm a bit disappointed in the answer to Councillor Percy's question. I have something, my view is similar. I find it very concerning that we're making decisions when, and Nicola, if you would, you may correct me, but from what I picked up from your answer, it was the savings are based on the current costs of those. Have those savings taken into account the costs of moving any equipment, the costs of paying off for the leases. It says we'll be making appropriate under the legal implications. There will be appropriate measures taken, but will there be costs to that? I'd like to know that before I make the decision in scrutiny to recommend this. I realise that it's a cabinet decision, but we scrutinise pre-cabinet, and I feel very dubious about recommending this without having that sort of information. Another implication is, for example, one of the leases is from Neath Talbot CVS, and might there be implications for the CVS which could actually cause further problems down the line for local people and cause costs moving forward? So I have concerns about not having that level of information in front of me before we look at a report like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. If I can come back to you, please, Nicola.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of the future costs over and above sort of utility bills, etc., the report does indicate that some of the buildings will potentially secure additional financial benefits in the future, and it's the second paragraph on page 92, dependent on the future uses of those buildings. So we haven't gone out to market on those buildings yet that we own, so it will obviously depend on the response to our marketing of those buildings as to how the scale of the future financial benefits that we secure. So we, at the moment we don't know that because we haven't gone to market yet. We wouldn't have gone to market until we had agreement from Cabinet that we could go to market, which is effectively what this report is securing. In terms of the leases, we are in discussion with the organisations who own those buildings. There are break clauses in place for all those leases at different dates. Now, we understand from early preliminary discussions with those organisations that there will not be an adverse impact upon those owners as a consequence of us removing ourselves from that leased property. So those are the early indications. We don't think there'll be a longer term impact, but we don't know what the future benefits financially are going to be until we've gone out to market. In terms of the costs associated with moving furniture, etc., we do have a team within our Environment Directorate who do this on a regular basis associated with facilities management. So we move people around buildings for different purposes, quite often. So that will be absorbed into our general expense budget expenses associated with facilities management. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Can I bring Andrew Jarrett in at this point, please? Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to give Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Percy the detail that they want, but given the ones in my particular directorate, I just wondered whether just a very brief explanation of who would be moving and where they'd be moving to, so that councillors have an idea about that. Take me 2 minutes, if that's okay, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, okay. So you've got the property in Forge Road. So we've currently got a children's services team in there called the Dufferin team. They are going to move out of that building, so that will be surplus to requirements, and they will be moving to the building that we have in Sandfields to co-locate with the Sandfields children's team. So we have a sort of south provision as far as that's concerned. So ostensibly there's no costs involved in that, albeit, as Councillor Reynolds says, there might be some moving costs and things like that, but minimal costs as far as that's concerned. As far as Orchard Street is concerned, we've rented a building from CVS for a number of years now in respect of the aftercare team meeting with young people. We have an alternative resource for that now. We've made CVS aware of that over the last 6 to 12 months, that we would be not utilising that building into the future. So I'm not expecting that was a surprise to them. And it's in a position where I would think that they could lease that building out again. It's in Neath town. So I'm not expecting that that's going to cost us anything, because we've already got a property upon which we can move that aftercare team into. The Kimler Hospital, well, that's a health run building. Health are looking for additional space where we're trying to move out of additional space, so they will just fill that. There will be some negotiations around the lease, no doubt, but I don't know what the costs of that are until those negotiations are finalised. Baglan Resource Centre, again, we have an adult social work team in that resource centre, quite significant cost actually. Again, the health board want that room back apparently, so that they could use it for alternative things. Again, we have our own accommodation. I don't know whether that one is particularly the Keys or whether they're going to come back to the civic centre in Port Talbot. But it'll be one of those, so there'll be no additional cost. So we're not building an additional cost by utilising other leases that we're having to make. We're moving people back into resources that we've already got. So those are the ones within my directorate, and so I'm not seeing any significant costs attached to those moves, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Reynolds, are you happy with the responses, please?
Thank you. I still, like Councillor Percy, would like the figures, and I would like more information in reports in the future. And I say thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Andrew. Informative. But Nicola wasn't talking about future possibilities. I was talking about the costs now, and very clearly, without the information, it's not possible for us to see whether the costs of giving up leases would actually negate the cost. It could do in decent sized buildings, and I've known cases where that's happened in the past. So you are assuring me, I believe, that that's not the case, and that it will bring in some cost savings. So thank you. I think that's the best we're going to achieve today, but we need to make sure we have more information going forward. It seems to be something that's happening in reports. There's not enough information being supplied, particularly on financial issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Duly noted. Thank you very much. Moving along, next is Councillor Carol Clement-Williams, please.
Thanks, Chair. I completely agree with my colleagues. What I would say is this is an item it's an item in the 2022-23 budget. The only information in there on that is what's in this report today. As a Labour group, we have mentioned on numerous occasions that we're not happy with the amount of detail within that budget paper. And I would ask that if this information is going to be circulated, Chair, could you ensure it's circulated to all members of council, because it is relevant to the budget that will be decided in council in March. And to be honest, I would welcome this very, very much, but I would welcome more information on a lot of other things that are mentioned in the budget we haven't really had this kind of clarity on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clement-Williams. It's duly noted, and I'll be pushing for all members to receive all the information, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Moving along in the chamber, we have Councillor Suzanne Patterson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't mention this earlier because it didn't occur to me, but it has since. We will be remaining with 3 of the properties are leased, so we just hand them back. We don't have any responsibility ongoing, but 2 of them are council owned, and it's been stated that we don't really know how long we'll have these properties to look after. So is there any security costs for empty buildings, or not just empty, but running costs? Because even if you're not got people in them, is there a cost to keeping it good enough to sell then, if that be the point? And if we're going to be having them on our sort of book, so to speak, for a long period, which we don't know, is there any risk? It says in there's a risk to crime and disorder. None. Well, if they're empty properties, that might not be the case if they're long-term empty properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Nicola, if you'd like to come back in, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The buildings which we are proposing to vacate, which are owned by the council, are located within our town centres primarily, or in urban built-up areas. So they're not in remote areas. Some of our bigger buildings, for example, Keys, we have our own security in place there. But that is the only building. Sorry, we've got security there, and we've got some element of security in Talbot Civic Centre, albeit in terms of the latter, that isn't 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So the security measures for all of our buildings does not necessarily require a physical presence there. We will, of course, be inspecting those premises once they are vacated to ensure that they haven't been the subject of any break-ins or damage. So I can assure members we will not be sort of locking the door and walking away and abandoning those buildings. We will have a care and maintenance responsibility for them going forward. And in terms of running costs, the member is quite correct. Whilst we won't be using as much energy following the closure of those buildings, we will have service charges, for example. So regardless of whether you use electricity or gas, you have to pay a daily service charge, whether you're a business or a residential property owner. So we will incur those charges, and we will have to ensure that enough heat is getting into those buildings while they're empty to prevent any damp penetration and to prevent the buildings falling into disrepair. But compared to the costs we will be incurring with the buildings fully occupied or partially occupied, it will be significantly less. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Patterson, are you happy with the response? Lovely, thank you. Thank you, Nicola. Sean Percy, back in then, please.
Deal, thank you, Chair. Yeah, to be honest, I'm more concerned about this as this discussion's gone on, because there's a couple of points. I'll start with sort of, you mentioned, Nicola, in your answer to my question, that some of the saving is from business rates, for example, on the buildings, which we would have to pay if they're vacant as well. So I'm trying to understand how we realise that saving. Now, obviously, one way of doing that is to sell the buildings quickly. But this report doesn't authorise the council to sell the buildings. It authorises them to be deemed surplus and to be handed over to Property and Regen for consideration of the options or something, words to that effect. But the report doesn't approve sale of the buildings, and I would certainly be very concerned about this. For example, putting Froodwood House on the market without having a discussion around the future of what is a really key, important building in that community. So, coming back to understanding what this report is and how it achieves its savings, is that £158,000? Does that include business rates? And does that assume the immediate sale of those two buildings very quickly? Or have we made an assumption that we'll have them for 12 months? It comes back to this issue of, do we really have enough detail to understand what it is we're agreeing here? I think, in respect of the leased properties, I appreciate Andrew's response, and that was really helpful and detailed, and those are the ones I was not overly concerned about, if I'm honest, though I appreciate Sonia's concern around the CVS is very valid. But in particular, these buildings that we do own, this is something that myself and other members have repeatedly raised about how we deal with disposal of our assets, because in the past we have we'll put that on the market and it's not our problem anymore, but actually we've got a responsibility as a council to make sure that these buildings aren't long-term vacant, or that the schemes that are brought forward, if they're redeveloped, are appropriate. And I think we do need time to consider what those schemes might be for a building like Froodwood House, for example, which is a different case to maybe the retail shop in Forge Road is a bit of a different case. But I'd be very concerned if the intention of this report is to immediately dispose of that building in order to realise those savings, and I'd really appreciate some information around that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Nicola, please.
Thank you, Chair. The responsibility for approving the sale of properties rests with the Cabinet Board, and you're the Chair of Scrutiny for that Cabinet Board, Councillor Percy. So it would go to that Cabinet Board for decision. What we are identifying as part of this report is that we need, for the reasons I've mentioned previously, to reduce the level of accommodation we as an authority are responsible for, not only to realise savings, but also to reduce our carbon footprint. So the principle of the report is to outline that to you, and we consider that phase 1 should consist of the 5 properties within the report that you have available. There are a number of assumptions that have been built into the costs because we don't know, I could put my house up for sale for X number of thousands of pounds. Whether I'll actually get that is something else. And, so it's all associated with the marketing of that property. And it may well be that we would like to retain it for an alternative purpose and repurpose it and lease it out to an organisation in its repurposed state. So we've got to pursue all of those avenues going forward, but we just need to establish that we have authorisation to move on with phase 1. We can come back with details, specific details about the costs and the assumptions that we've used for members. But, I think it's fair to say that we need to secure those budget savings to ensure that we are able to provide a balanced budget on behalf of the council, so that we can ensure that we can continue to deliver services and we can avoid any compulsory redundancies. And this is one of a number of different schemes that we're proposing as a package to enable the council to do that. It's not an easy task that Hugh has had to sort of manoeuvre through to try and secure the budget problems. And fortunately, we as an authority have come out stronger than other authorities who have had to not only close down services, but they're making people redundant and they're closing buildings. Now, we are fortunate enough not to be in that position, but we do have to make difficult decisions going forward. Reducing our accommodation assets is one of them, but it's not a really significant decision that we've got to make in the grand scheme of things. But I'm taking on board the comments that members have made in this meeting, and we will circulate more detailed costs and the assumptions upon which those costs are based as soon as I have that information available to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Councillor Percy, would you like to come back?
Yeah, only briefly, just to seek sort of, again, just some clarity that if it is possible, that the intention isn't that after this, if this report goes through and is approved by Cabinet, that another report will immediately be brought forward to sell these buildings. And I think it's hard for me to understand that without knowing whether the assumption that has been used on this cost saving relies on that happening. And I just feel a little uncomfortable that I may be recommending a decision here that may result in us having to go down the path of then selling that building without considering other options. And I feel uncomfortable with that by not really understanding how much the business rate and the retention of that building has been factored into these costs or not. And I'm not sure I'm going to get comfortable with it, with the information that's available to me today, but I need to express that's sort of how I feel at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Nicola, would you like to come back? Yep.
Yeah. I'm not really sure what more I can add to the debate that we've had, Chair, because we need to reduce the level of accommodation we as an authority manage, to reduce our carbon footprint and to reduce our energy bills and our revenue costs as an organisation. So we have to do this. It's not something unique to our authority. All public organisations are currently doing something very similar. These are the buildings that we've identified are the ones that are more are easier to vacate, to ensure that we get early savings. We will be reporting to a Cabinet board at a later date should we get offers for those buildings once we've undertaken marketing, and the Cabinet board will have the final decision on whether we sell for any specific prices that we've been offered. So we're not. I don't really know what more I can add to this discussion. We're advising members that 2 of the buildings that we own are surplus to requirements because we can remove those staff and put them in our other accommodation. And as a consequence of that, we are making those buildings available for sale, and we'll obviously try to secure the best price for the most appropriate use within those buildings. So I don't really have anything further to add, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. I think we're going a little bit round in circles now. I appreciate Councillor Percy's concerns on this, but I think you offered answers that are clear enough at the moment. Hopefully, if you could provide the figures for us, please, Nicola, I think people will be a lot happier than I think a breakdown of each of the options, please, and seeing where the costs and the savings are, please, and I'd be grateful for that. Is that okay? I'm going to move along a little bit now then. Thank you, Nicola. I'm going to move along now. Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Carol Clement-Williams again, please?
Thanks, Chair. I don't have a problem with voting for this today. I think what my concern would be, and I'm not expecting an answer, Nicola, and thank you for all the work that you've put in, you and all the officers. I think the concern from us, or from me certainly, is that it's been used in the line of a budget to balance the budget, but there's no guarantee that it will come through to fruition. So for me, that's why I'm disappointed with the information that we have, because we don't know if any of this will come to fruition. We don't know whether we will be able to release and what have you. So I think that's my main concern on it. So if we could see the detail moving forward, as you've already said, we'll have, Chair. I'm quite happy to go with this motion today.
Thank you, Councillor Clement-Williams. Very grateful. We noted your observations. Thank you. Are there any questions, please? Any more questions? Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Percy, I'm assuming it's a legacy hand up. Yes?
It's not, but you've already indicated you wanted to move on, so it's
if you
your
could,
discretion,
Sean.
Chair.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Sean. The recommendations are listed on page 94 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. I'm happy to propose them. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Spooner, please. Thank you. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I don't see any abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Charlotte. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I can see Councillor Percy's hand up, Chair. So we've got one member voting against the contrary, but
Okay.
the recommendation still goes through to Cabinet Board, Chair.
Okay, the recommendation has gone through to the Cabinet Board then. Thank you very much. Item 11, Capital Budget Monitoring Report 22-23, as of the end of December 2022, on pages 103 and 114. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
Yes, please, Chair, just to give members an overview of the report. So this is the monitoring report for the capital programme as at the end of December. It details the fact that the previous capital programme agreed by Cabinet was £70.4 million. This report proposes a new capital programme for this year of £54 million, with a number of amendments detailed in the report and a detailed line-by-line schedule in Appendix 2 showing the changes from the previously approved budget to the one proposed in front of Cabinet today. Appendix 1 of the report details expenditure to date of £26.4 million against delivery of the programme, and I'm more than happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hugh. Do members have any questions for the officers? I'm taking questions. I've got a few lined up. Councillor Rob Jones, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What's concerning me in relation to this report is the number of areas that are listed for reprofile and number of underspends throughout the report as of the date of the report. And I would look for Hugh for explanations here in relation to it. In particular, looking at page 109, disability facilities grant. These have always been highly sought after, and we've always had limited amount of expenditure to put to this. Yet in the report, It's reprofiling £1 million for the DFG. I note there is £5 million plus being reprofiled for City Deal, 500k for Margam Park, the complete £1.2 million for the supported living new build. There's been nothing spent in relation to that. And really surprising, £3.3 million for school maintenance, when every councillor has criticised how much school maintenance has been available. And yet we've got what appears to be a £3.3 million underspend, because otherwise it wouldn't be profiled into next year's budget. 29 areas of reprofiling, which is a considerable amount of money. Even on the back of a cigarette packet, I worked out a £21 million reprofiling for the capital projects next year. And I find it astounding, really, that we are saving money this year on spends to profile them for next year's spend. And I can't believe that we've got such an underspend to reprofile going forward into next year's budget. And therefore, the suspicion in me is wondering how much this will affect the budget that we are going to be discussing on the 2nd of March. So I don't know if Hugh can explain some of the underspends, even just in the areas that I've highlighted, with such a £21 million reprofiling. And again, I won't steal Councillor Percy's questions in relation to one particular area, but I am really surprised in relation to this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Hugh, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I agree, Councillor Jones, is quite a significant amount of reprofiling. So in terms of disabled facilities grants, obviously there was a significant amount of budget carried forward from 2021-22 due to the fact that we couldn't get contractors to work during the pandemic. That was added to the 22-23 budget when it was brought forward. However, again, in terms of capacity of the supply chain, we've had to reprofile some of that into next year purely because we can't get people to do the work. In terms of City Deal, as you will know, there is limited capacity within Nicola's regeneration team. They have been working throughout the year in terms of the SPF and Shared Prosperity Fund bids, the Levelling Up Fund bids, the Wild Fox Resort, etc. So unfortunately, some of those City Deal projects have had to move into next year. In terms of some of the school programme, you'll be aware that the Welsh Government has actually allocated additional money during the year. So what that is doing is actually moving our money into next year, and we are spending some Welsh Government money instead. And obviously, in terms of work in schools, there are only limited windows where you can do, not windows as in physical windows, limited time windows where you can undertake capital work in schools. So there's a capacity and a profiling issue there. And in terms of the supported living, that's a contribution we're making towards a project that I believe the City and County Swansea are running. So therefore, there's a delay in terms of our contribution to that project. I think they were the ones that you mentioned, Councillor Jones, and Margam Park. Again, there is further work being undertaken in terms of the project there, with a report due back before the relevant Cabinet Board in the near future in terms of that project. So accepting what you say, it is a significant reduction in the budget from £70 to £54 million. But the purpose is to try and get the revised budget as accurate as possible. So thank you very much, Chair. And obviously, I've got more questions to come. So thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Hugh, for the explanation. There was some of those areas that hadn't been made clear, and hence the questions. But I raised Wild Fox and the implication of the workforce earlier in the previous question. So my next question would be: is what are the officers, the executive officers, this may be something for Karen to answer, are going to do to address the lack of workforce in relation to implement capital works programmes going forward?
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
If I give a general response in the first instance, and Nicola might want to come in on some more of the specifics. We have already strengthened a number of the functions in the Environment Directorate across planning, across highways and across regeneration. And we'll be looking to do the same
on the back of the Shared Prosperity Fund monies that we've got as well. There will also be a proposal coming forward in the next couple of months around some of the more strategic investments we've got and a reshaping of the way in which we'll respond to those. So some strengthening that we've done already, some that we're in the process of looking at, but there will be some further proposals that emerge in the next couple of months as well. Because I think probably everybody can recognise that the extent of the inward investment interest that we've got, these huge projects that we've got all happening around the same time, is having an impact on the day-to-day work that we're undertaking. So quite clearly, we've done some work on there, but it's not sufficient. So just wondering, Nick, do you want to just come in and add to what I've just said, because you might be able to be a bit more specific?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. In terms of the City Deal projects, we have had a delay in terms of delivery, and that is as a consequence of us not being able to recruit suitable people to the project teams, and that's not for the want of trying. For one of the particular jobs, we actually went out about 3 times, and we not only advertised externally and via our local authority vacancy bulletin, we also used the vacancy bulletins of all of our partners within the South West region, both as local authorities, our health partners and our university partners, and still we were unable to secure any recruits. We've now, from securing approval from the programme board, we've actually appointed a consultant to do some of that work with us in terms of the first phase, so that we can actually make progress. But we are currently projected to achieve all the benefits within our benefits realisation plan. So the outputs associated with the project are still, as far as we are concerned, deliverable despite the slow delay. Hugh and Karen have mentioned that we have increased capacity within the services which I run, and that is true. But we are still having recruitment issues within the department. I mentioned earlier the City Deal job. We have other vacant jobs within the department, and what we're finding is that the job officers within the directorate, including myself, we go into multiple different meetings for different purposes, and we're basically taking one hat off and going into another meeting and putting another hat on. So that has been recognised, and we have had additional funding to address that. But securing the funding and securing people who are qualified and experienced into those jobs are a different matter. So we're working with Sheena's team at the moment to try and address that going forward. In terms of the construction projects, Hugh has mentioned that we have been delayed due to the pandemic. Not only is that reduced the workforce that is available to us, but it's also increased the costs of materials, and the availability of materials as well. You know, it's on the news at the moment about different food products not being available in some supermarkets, restricting the amount of particular fruits and vegetables that people can buy. That's also happening in the construction sector, where we cannot get access to materials. So that is impacting upon our ability to deliver. We have got risk registers in place for all our projects, and we report to programme boards on a regular basis in relation to those risks. And we are fairly comfortable that we can achieve the outcomes that we initially identified, albeit subject to the delays that have been referred to in this item. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Karen. Can I hand over to Hugh now then, please? Can I bring Hugh in, please?
Yep, yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to give members of the Scrutiny Committee and Cabinet some reassurance as well in terms of this reprofiling, this money is not being lost. It is just being moved from one year to the next to represent the fact that projects have been delayed for a number of reasons as have been outlined. So just to give members assurance, we're not losing this money, we're just moving it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jones, you want to come back?
Yeah, just quickly, Chair. I accept what Nicola says about cost of materials, but therefore I would expect an overspend in relation to these areas, because the cost of materials to deliver the capital projects would have been higher, and therefore there should have been an overspend, not an underspend or lack of spend. And I was wondering whether Hugh would be in a position, therefore, to provide us, and particularly in relation to schools maintenance and DFGs, what is the weighting cost in relation to the outstanding works that we haven't been able to complete because of the pandemic. And, you know, how is that going to be affected going forward with these underspends for the variety of reasons that both you and Nicola have provided?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Hugh?
Just chatting now, the Chief Executive suggested I might bring a more detailed report back to the Policy and Resources Subcommittee in terms of the specifics around some of those proposals. If that would be helpful to Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I think there's a theme coming through that we need more detail in these reports, because we're trying to pull teeth when the answers should be there, and we shouldn't be having to ask these questions. But I welcome the opportunity to do that. Thank you, Chair.
Karen?
Yeah, I was just going to comment really. I think what we're seeing is a shift in the risk profile that the councillors needed to manage. So I think use the scrutiny time is what I would encourage people to do, to ask for more detail to understand those particular risks, because we could put lots more information in every single report that we're writing. That obviously then consumes even more officer time, and we're very much struggling in some areas in terms of capacity. But I think if we can have a dialogue maybe, and I know we've got a meeting coming up next week, and in terms of how the briefings for the Shadow Cabinet, for example, might operate. I think working between with the Shadow Cabinet, but also as with chairs of scrutiny, just to look at where are the kind of key risks now that the council is facing, and making sure the members have got sufficient information to be able to take the types of assurances that you're looking for, which we've heard about in the meeting. We'd be very happy then to respond to that. But I think it would help us if we could agree what that level of detail is. Otherwise, we could be spending an awful lot of time writing even longer reports, which may not then, in the round be what we're looking for. So that's the only observation I would make. But I think, highlighting the risk around capacity, workforce, I think you'll see that it'll come through in a number of different areas of the council's business at the moment.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Jones, are you happy?
Yeah, this is why I highlighted item 8 and item 9 in relation to workforce and the commitment in relation to that. And it is a concern of mine. And I agree with Karen, there is a very fine line between too much information, large reports, and insufficient information. And I would welcome that dialogue, and we'll look to that next week when we meet with the leadership. But I think this is a current theme that's bubbling through a lot of the scrutiny committees, and perhaps we need to nail it now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I have another question. Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Thank you. It's a specific question. I'm not sure if anyone has the information on this one, but it was one of the items of reprofiling is one that's sort of been knocking around for a while, which is the Pontardawe Arts Centre Cinema. And I just wondered how confident we were that we'd be able to spend the money in the coming financial year. It's been reprofiled forward for 1 year, but this project's been discussed and bumped forward a number of years now. And of course, Rob's already mentioned about inflation, and it's currently just been reprofiled as the same amount. I'm sure as time's trundling on, that project may need some additional funding as well. I just wondered if any officers are able to comment on that project and how confident we are it's deliverable next year. Thank you. Thank you,
Councillor Percy. Hugh, please.
I don't have the answer specifically, but I believe my colleague Rhiannon from Education is on the call. Whether she will know or not, I will be able to come back and get an answer for you, Councillor Percy. I'll hand over to Rhiannon on a screen somewhere.
Thank you, Hugh. Here I am. I'm sorry, I don't have the detail for Pontardawe either, but I can find out and get it to you. But I'm not sure. Sorry, it's not an area I've had a lot to deal with, and I don't know the answer.
Thank you, Hugh and
Apologies.
Rhiannon. Councillor Percy, are we okay to hold information come forward at a slightly later date? Is that okay?
Yeah, no problem. If I can be circulated, that'd be great. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item, please? Oh, sorry. Councillor Reynolds, please.
Just following on from that, and I'll be interested to see what Rhiannon manages to supply, because in the budget papers, it's clear that we're expecting these projects, these centres to start covering their own costs in full without subsidy. And it's going to be really difficult for Pontardawe Arts Centre to do that, for example, if it doesn't have the investment that was planned. It's a very important, Valleys centre, and it makes how we look at the budget going forward next week really quite difficult with this sort of thing bubbling around in the background. So thank you.
If I can bring in Karen, Chief Executive, please.
What I'd suggest then, Councillor Brenner, is given that you want more information to inform the scrutiny of the budget next week, is that we make sure you have an update specifically on that project. Unfortunately, there's a couple of colleagues who would have the detail that are not on the call today. There will be a report that will come forward on the Pontardawe Arts Centre, because I know that there have been some delays in there, but as you rightly say as well, there are cost increases as well because of what's happened with inflation. So there is a report that's due to come back to the Cabinet or the Cabinet Board in the very near future on that. But I think particularly, Chair, given the point that was made about the subsidy target next year, because the budget will be obviously about setting next year's budget, not the years after. I think just to make sure the members have got enough information to make sense of that, we can make sure that there's a briefing in the intervening period, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Karen. Are you happy with that, Councillor Reynolds? Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, then. Are there any more questions? Okay. The recommendations are listed on page 106 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. I'm happy to propose them. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ken Phillips. Thank you. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I don't see any abstentions, Chair.
Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I don't see anyone against the recommendations, Chair, so that's supported to Cabinet.
Thank you, Charlotte. On to item 12, Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for 2022 to 2023, as at the end of December 2022, pages 115 to 132 in the agenda pack. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
Just to highlight, Chair, that this report obviously is the third quarter Revenue Budget Monitoring Report, and I'm pleased to note that it looks at that point in time as if the Council's overall expenditure will be delivered within budget this financial year just by £86,000 overspend, Chair. So very good news, and thank you to all my colleagues who've worked hard to deliver that position for us this year. So that's all I wanted to add, Chair, but once again, happy to take any questions if there's detail that members want that's not in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. Do members have any questions for the officers? I have two lined up at the moment. Councillor Rob Jones, please.
Simple question for you, Hugh. Page 123, levies and contributions. You've got the Fire Authority. It says other levies and contributions. Could you give an example or explain what those are, those bodies?
Yeah, of course. So there's £46,000 for the Swansea Port Health Authority levy, £1,000 levy for the Margam Joint Crematorium Committee, £117,000 levy for the Corporate Joint Committee. There's a contribution towards the Archive Service of £96,000 and a contribution towards the Magistrates Court of £10,000, given the 270. That's detailed in total. But I'll take on board observations. If you prefer to see more detail in the report, then happy to do so in future. Thank you.
Able to save the question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay with that, Councillor Jones. Thank you. Councillor Ken Phillips, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief point. On page 119, in the final full paragraph, it says Welsh Government have awarded NPT an additional 3371k towards the cost of temporary accommodation, which would be 3.371 million. I'm assuming the first three ought to be pound sign. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I'd love to have taken £3.3 million, but actually the first three, as you say, Councillor Phillips, should be a pound sign, leaving £371,000 contribution. So Well spotted.
Thank you. Thank you, Hugh. It'd be nice if you could have the 3 million, right? It'd be nice. Is that okay, Councillor Phillips? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions on this item, please?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Carol Clement Williams, please.
Thanks, Chair, and apologies, I didn't ask this earlier because my computer was freezing and I couldn't get in time. It's actually on that page that Councillor Phillips referred to. The paragraph, 3/4, or just over half the way down, the Housing Advice Support Tenancy Service is presently predicting 656. So basically, they're saying it's incorporated now into policy. It doesn't, although there's an overspend of 656, it doesn't actually mention, although it's been brought into policy, how that's going to be paid for. And was just wondering if I could have a little bit more information on that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Clement Williams. Could I bring in Andrew Jarrett, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Clement Williams. So it's a change of government policy. It's here to stay. We have put it as a pressure for next year. You'll see that in the papers that you see, which are pressures under consideration. We're looking at the rapid rehousing policy, implementing that as soon as we can. That we're hoping that will bring some of that down. We really need to move to more of a prevention element of this, Councillor, and we're hoping that's going to bring that amount down, that overspend in coming years. So we are working on it. We're working on a different approach to housing, which you'll see over the coming months when Shelley Howard, who's the new interim head of service, brings back her strategy for housing. But we are doing a lot of work behind the scenes on that 656 to try and reduce it in future years. And we'll be able to update you in more detail in the next couple of months.
Thank you, Chair. If
Thank you, Andrew.
Yes, I do know that you're doing an awful lot of work around that, Mr. Jarrett. I think the point is that a change in legislation unfunded once again, and it's very disappointing that they seem to think we can swallow any new legislation with the money that we already have. Yeah. So I do appreciate there's a lot of work going on, but it could be a matter for lobbying for the Cabinet Member for Finance again to Cardiff to say, well, you've given us this legislation, you need to help us pay for it until we can get it all sorted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clement Williams. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions on this item, please?
Does Mr. Jarrett want to come back in, Chair?
Oh, sorry, I'm just looking up.
Sorry, Chair.
Andrew,
just very briefly, just to reassure Councillor Clement Williams. So absolutely, we are. I know that the Cabinet Member for Housing, Deputy Leader, is already talking to Welsh Government about that. The Leader's made his views clear as well, as have I, around, when you change policy, you need to fund it properly. And so we are absolutely making those points.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions on the item, please? Any issues? Okay, thank you. The recommendations are listed for this on page 125 of the Cabinet agenda pack. I'm happy to propose it. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Tim Bowen. Thank you. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I don't see any abstentions, Chair.
Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I don't see anyone against the recommendation, Chair, so that's supported to Cabinet.
Thank you, Charlotte. On to item 15, the 2022-2023 Risk Register Monitoring Report, pages 159 to 166. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
Nothing to add, Chair. I think it's relatively self-explanatory, and the report just details the more strategic risks the Council is managing at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Hugh. I personally would like to bring one up on that because I've noticed a couple of the red ones, so just focusing in on one, on the Panteg slip, the Kevin Road I'm trying to get the pronunciation right. Sorry, Hugh. I've noticed that for the majority of the items on there have been completed. What's holding us up? Sorry, Nicola.
Yeah, me again. Sorry, Chair. We've had a couple of issues in relation to the demolition of phase 1 of Cuffin Road, and phase 1, for the benefit of members, is numbers 90, 92, 94 and 96 Cuffin Road. We have exchanged contracts with the owners of those properties. The solicitors acting on their behalf are currently making some last minute amendments which will not make any huge significant differences to the outcome. We have had the contractors' health and safety and CDM details, so they are being considered internally, and we are hoping to be on site in the middle of March. 2 weeks prior to us starting on site, we will be consulting or advising the local community that the works are going ahead to demolish phase 1. We are hoping that after the demolition of phase 1, we will then have momentum around phase 2, and members will be aware that phase 2 is the trickier houses in the street, and we have got insurance companies still failing to pay out the owners of those properties because they don't think that there is a real health and safety issue associated with those properties, despite the fact that a number of them don't have a back garden because there is a sheer drop behind their back door. And sorry, my headphones fell off then. We are hoping that once we start work on phase 1, that will send a clear message to the insurance companies, and we'll work to progress on phase 2 ASAP. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Very clear. Thank you. I was just wondering to change some of our reds into ambers. That's what I'm looking for, really. Thank you. I also have Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this is in relation to the first risk listed in the document SR01, which is relating to if there's insufficient investment in the council's major infrastructure, then it's at risk of failure. I wonder whether officers have considered the risk on buildings maintenance when putting together the register, and I flagged this up based on a previous discussion we had in Cabinet Scrutiny Committee around the maintenance around Pontardawe's swimming pool, and obviously as part of that discussion and something we've discussed previously in committees around the council's resourcing, staffing resource available to have an up-to-date condition record of all its buildings. You know, we've got limited surveyor capacity, etc. So I'm just wondering whether that risk has been considered and assessed, and perhaps not met the criteria to be put in the register, or whether that's something that's maybe still outstanding to be done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Nicola, please.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a number of surveyors operating within the authority, and they are allocated to particular directorates. So, for example, the schools, the Education Directorate has a surveyor who inspects the schools, etc., etc. Now, the schools have a devolved maintenance budget to ensure that we can identify what maintenance needs to be undertaken and complete it. And we also have a general maintenance budget for all the rest of the buildings, which amounts to £1.74 million. It's not a huge sum of money, and we have to use it wisely to address the bigger risks associated with our buildings. Now, in previous years, we have had financial support from the Welsh Government. Unfortunately, that financial support is no longer there. So it's what we secure directly through the revenue support grant that enables us to undertake the maintenance on our properties. And that's another reason why we're trying to reduce the number of properties that we have within the council's accommodation stocks, because some of our buildings are in a poor state of repair, and we're having to continually invest in the maintenance of those buildings when we should actually be looking at whether or not we need to continue to occupy those buildings going forward. So in terms of the maintenance regime, In previous years, when we had far more money, we used to have a rolling programme of maintenance. Now we are called out based on any contact from the responsible persons of those buildings, and we will do spot checks now and again. But that is all that the money will enable us to undertake, given the fact that we only have a restricted budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Percy?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I appreciate the sort of background and context. I think that just probably reinforces my question around have we assessed the risk? Obviously, because all of that is a risk in terms of the structural integrity of our buildings, in terms of our ability to spend money on them and inspect them and understand what their condition is in. And so my direct question is, have we assessed that risk, or is that something that we need to consider including on the risk register, given that we have all these cost pressures, given we have limited staff and resourcing, to be able to be aware of the exact condition of all of our building stock? And have we assessed that risk? Should it be included? I think that's my direct question, but I appreciate the context around it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Nicola?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it's on there, isn't it? You said SRO1 on my screen. It's tiny writing. I should have a magnifying glass. But the risk register identifies all of the risks that we have as an authority. And in relation to SRO1, we've identified it as a medium risk, and that's on the basis that we do have a maintenance budget in place, and we do have surveyors who are inspecting those properties as and when necessary, which is why it's not a red risk. But because of the restricted amount of money that we do have available, it's not a green risk either, because it's that we are carrying risk because the number of buildings we have in a poor state of repair exceed the budget allocation we have available to work with.
Thank you, Nicola. Can I bring in Karen, our Chief Executive, please?
Nicola, I'm just wondering if something's actually happened with the report and whether something's been inadvertently cut out of the mitigations on there, because we do have property asset management plans. Clearly, the basis on which we select schools within the Strategic School Improvement Programme takes into account the risks around the buildings. And I think what may have happened, Nicola, because we've had various iterations of this, is that detail seems to have somehow got cut out of the lines against that particular major infrastructure risk. So I think we probably can give some assurances to Councillor Percy that we do have mechanisms in place that have assessed the risks around our property assets. But I think that probably there's a couple of lines looking at this that may have inadvertently been cut out. So I think we can probably take that action away, Chair, make sure that that's reflected in the next version of this that you get for monitoring purposes. The other thing I would say as well is that this is obviously the strategic risk register, and it's underpinned by operational risk registers. So, for example, if a particular service is relying on particular buildings to support a service delivery, I would be expecting the business plans, service recovery plans, to be identifying any risks around that service delivery, and then those risks to be reflected in the operational risk register. And there are criteria then for things being escalated up into the strategic risk register, and also being stepped down then into operations once they've been satisfactorily addressed. So just looking at the detail there, I think the lines in there that reflect the arrangements around property asset management seem to be missing, because what we've got in there is the other classes of assets around fleet, structures, etc. But the property does seem to have disappeared.
Thank you, Karen. Very clear. Councillor Percy, you're happy with that? If we, I'm sure we can find that and pass it on, Karen.
Yeah, no, obviously
Yeah,
I appreciate Karen's explanation there, and obviously my question was because it wasn't included within that risk. I think perhaps the wording around that risk, major infrastructure and buildings, might just make it more clear as well that should be considered as part of it, because I think perhaps major infrastructure is a little too vague. But I appreciate the response, and obviously look forward to seeing that document at the next time it comes to report it to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. I have next up Councillor Carol Clement-Williams, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm coming in here, Chair, because we're at the end of the financial report, and as always, I would love to pass on my thanks to Hugh and all of the finance teams and all the other officers that feed into these financial reports. There's a huge amount of work that goes into all of them, and I think a thank you goes a long way. With your indulgence, Chair, I wasn't sure where to bring this in, but I've been looking at these reports and wondering, as the 2022-23 budget is heavily reliant on a huge rise in income generation to balance the budget at the end of the year, should we or could we have a new financial report on what's happening around the income generation in order to comply with that balanced budget at the end of the year, or whether we should put it into the forward work programme to look into that as an item on its own? Just thought I would ask that question, because it is a big part of next year's budget, and I would like to know how we will measure that throughout the year moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Clement Williams. Can I bring Charlotte in at this point, please?
Yes, Councillor Carol Clement Williams, thank you for that. We've got the forward work programme scheduled on our scrutiny agenda for today, so if that's something that you would wish that the committee has sight of in future meetings, then we can include that on our forward work programme. That's okay.
I would if the chair would indulge.
Thank you, Councillor Clement Williams. Thank you. Are there any questions on this? Sorry, Councillor Rob Jones again, please.
Yeah, slight tangent, Chair, but I don't know if it'll be of any assistance going forward with several of areas that we've talked about today. We've had at least 2 iterations within a ward geographic area of all council buildings, their state as the building and the state of the M&E within the building. They are graded from A right down, I think it was D being the worst and A being the best. If we're looking to rationalise our buildings, and this included everything, community centres, schools, the lot, would it be worth a little bit of updating of those existing reports? They came out about 5 years ago. They normally like once a term with the council, to give some councillors an idea of the current state of buildings that are vulnerable within their ward and buildings that are sound and secure. It may help newly elected members and existing members going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Could I pass this on to Nicola, please?
Thank you, Chair. We've got an asset management plan, which is, I'm assuming, the document that Councillor Jones is referring to, and I'll arrange for a copy to be circulated to members after this meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Are we happy with that, Councillor Jones? Thank you very much. Are there any other questions on this? On this one, this is report for information, therefore we note the report. Okay. Agenda item 5, the forward working programme. This item is just for noting, unless any.
Just to mention, just under this forward work programme item, the Councillor Carol Clement Williams had a suggestion based on the 2022-2023 income generation report. So I think the committee would wish to include that.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Okay. And the other one, just a reminder, and you've had notice, in case you haven't, we've got the Public Services Board scrutiny being put in for the 10th of March. All right, just reminding everyone about that. Agenda item 6, urgent items. You'll be glad to hear that I don't have any urgent items. Okay. Being as there's no further items, that ends the business for today. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you all for attending, and have a nice journey home for those who are here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for the